Welcome back to the Buffalo Bread Podcast, Season 6, and the continuing and final episode of our annual tradition, unlike any other, Friends of the Pod, not Friends of the Bills. We are capping off in style with one of our favorite co-hosts, Jared, who is our resident Jets expert. Jared, it's great to have you back on the pod for a multitude of reasons. You are feel like the soothsayer for Jets Nation out there whenever you come on the pod, but I think most importantly, you really do resonate with a lot of our listeners because they love your voice. They were like, now that dude, he's got a podcast voice, unlike me and JJ, who they barely can stand the way we kind of grate and monotone talk through stuff. It is always a highlight for our listeners when you come on, A, for your content, B, for the vocal aesthetic that you bring to the table. So Jared, it's great to have you back on the pod, man. How you doing?
I can't wait to forward these compliments on to my mom so she feels a little bit better about the undergrad investment that she made in my broadcasting career that I never actually pursued professionally. So this is good.
That's great. That's great. Listen, before we get into it, you not only have a podcast voice, you actually have a podcast. So why don't you head up our listeners with some of your socials, some of your information, put your good stuff out there before we get into the Jets.
My home base is Nail the Recruiting Process on Instagram. I run a podcast that helps guide high school athletes and their families through the recruiting process at the collegiate level. I will say I'm on a smidgen of a heater right now. I always do my podcast in the off season of the college basketball season, and my guests from this past season were like generationally good, both on the men's and the women's side.
Nice.
So I've got interviews with a lot of coaching staffs that just made big splashes in both the men's and women's NCAA tournament. That's really, really exciting. And you can check it out at Nail the Recruiting Process or anywhere you get your podcasts, the Nail the Recruiting Process podcast.
Awesome. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. You won't regret it. On the topic of regrets, let's transition to I love nothing better than a hard transition, right? Yeah. So there we go. So listen, man, I don't think 2025, there were sky high expectations. You came into last season, I think, very reasonable on what Aaron Glenn's first year was going to look like. Mm-hmm. And, I think, and we'll get into it a little bit from my perspective, it's fair that Glenn is coming back for another season, right? But it did look like at times, and we never saw this in the Saleh era, it did look like at times the team was quitting. What I couldn't tell, though, is if they were quitting on the coach or if they were quitting on the organization that at the trade deadline decided to ship out some of your most vaunted pieces from the previous era. That to me was kind of a signal of, all right, we are planning for 26 and 27 for this organization. And I don't think Glenn bears the blame for that. It did feel like the players maybe were less inclined to play for the organization at times. Case in point, Mitchell Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky, who, listen, we love us a good Mitch Trubisky meme here on this pod, but he got paid in Tennessee in large part because of the lack of effort in Week 18 that the Jets were able to put up.
So you mean when Mitch Trubisky looked like the greatest quarterback of all time, and it's like, oh my God, if Josh Allen gets hurt, he's going to be like the next Jeff Hostetler. Yeah,
dude.
I remember.
And I love everybody that follows us on social media, but I had people sliding into our comments who are like, watching Mitch Trubisky play against the Jets. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we need to have a hard conversation about Josh Allen because this offense has never looked better under Mitch. And I'm like, it's because they're playing the Jets, right?
I'm here to tell you didn't watch enough Jets football last season.
I was going to say, you've only watched 2 Jets games and they're both the ones the Bills played in, guys. Right. But, I think rightfully so, Glenn gets another chance here heading into 2026. It's an entirely new coaching staff, which is usually the sign of a last chance for a coach before an organization moves on. But some interesting hires, I think, that come along with that. And then, of course, maybe finally stabilizing the QB position with the return of one Geno Smith, right? So we now head into the new league year, man, and there is some potential for the Jets, I think, to really make some hay building block wise. They've already done so in free agency. I like a lot of the moves they made, but the draft is really where they got to nail it, right? But before we get into that, I always like to start these season postmortems on a positive note. While it was not the season you guys planned for, and it was maybe rougher than you intended to, like nothing is without a little positivity. So why don't you walk some of our listeners through your 2025 highlights for the New York Jets?
I'm exclusively looking at this from a general manager's lens. So I want to flash back to our conversation a year ago where we talked about what Moogie and Glenn's day one press conference was and what their stated goals were. Their stated goals were identify pieces currently that they can build around, draft and move pieces to get as many draft picks as possible, and then build the future of their organization around young players that they draft. They stated explicitly on day one, we do not want to be a free agent heavy team. We want to be a team that drafts, develops, and retains, and that's the key to long-term success in the modern NFL. If I were evaluating on that, and I'm evaluating based on what rebuilds tend to look like in the NFL when they're done right, because we have a big enough sample size to choose from, I think the best thing that the Jets did this year is that they didn't make any of their bad problems worse, and they lived their mission. So let's use the Sauce Gardner trade as the key example.
It's a great one, yeah.
You have heard me on this podcast say that I think Sauce Gardner is not as good as his statistics have inflated him to be.
This is why we love you. We agree.
Yeah. They sold as high as humanly possible. They flipped him for 2 draft picks and Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell was the best receiver on the Jets for the final quarter of the season.
Love that kid too.
Yep.
He just needs a shot. Yes.
And again, perfect fit for what the Jets are saying they want. Young person, buying low, developing. Let's see what he can do. They flip another trade to the Philadelphia Eagles for John Mechie III, and the Jets' 2 best slot weapons for the final half of the season are 2 players that did not start the season on their team offensively. So they are showing you, and I know this is a low expectation, but remember who we're talking about. They are showing you at a baseline, Dan, competency in season. These are moves that people typically make in the offseason that they made in November and were successful. So that's a big thing for me, is that they were able to identify on the fly where are our problem areas, where are the people that we're going to have to be stuck overpaying that might not even buy into what we're doing, and can we flip them? Now, to your point, when that happened, you could tell that it sunk some of the veterans.
Yes.
And you could tell, and I think if I were to give you kind of the dark spot, it was definitely the way the season ended. You could tell that everyone sort of lost their heart. And something I thought about over and over again, and I wonder if this is going to become a recurring theme for this little segment, is you can't talk about Aaron Glenn without talking about what he just did with the Detroit Lions. And one of the most viral segments of coaching in the last 25 years of NFL football is Dan Campbell begging the Lions in year 1 to stay bought into him.
Yes. And that's an interesting comp. Yeah. Keep going with that.
No. So and may I add, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, they didn't. And he kept around anyone that did. Flipped the rest of his pieces. They drafted exceptionally. They used new coordinators, Aaron Glenn included, and they flew to the moon. And I think the Jets are on their way to the moon? No. I do not think the Jets are on their way to the moon. Do I think we can upgrade from Penn Station to Grand Central Station? Yes, I do. So what I see is a team that is living their mission. They have accomplished the exact thing they said that they wanted to accomplish, which was we want to work around our dead cap space issues, and we want to get as many picks as we can. We want to identify the culture problems and get them out. We want to identify our people and get them in. And if you look at what they've done in short time, they're on their way.
Dude, and I wanted to bring this up later, but you've segued and set it up perfectly, right? I wanted to bring this up when we talked about the Jets draft, but that Lions comp is so true. That first season under Dan Campbell, that Lions team only had 3 wins. Mm-hmm. And remember, we were mocking him in that offseason heading into the 21 draft, the kneecap biter guy and all that stuff. That draft ended up being a seminal moment for them where they really got the building blocks that they needed to build not just the team, but the culture that led them to the moment the Lions are in now, which is perennial NFC contender and has Dan Campbell considered one of the best coaches in the league. As a Jets fan, that's got to give you a little bit of faith that coming from that culture that Aaron Glenn did, plus his connection and his passion for the Jets organization, they're setting things up in the same way with some of the moves that they've made. I mean, that next draft year for the Lions, they got Aiden Hutchinson, when healthy, all-pro edge rusher, Jamison Williams, maybe the nastiest, fastest number 2 wide receiver there is in the league, Kirby Joseph, all-pro defensive back, and then really nice depth pieces in Malcolm Rodriguez and James Houston at the linebacker core. I mean, you can't ask for more than 3 solid starters, 2 all-pros, and then some really great depth pieces behind that. If you're a Jets fan and you're sitting here with 4 top 50 picks in the 2026 draft, you've got to look at that blueprint in Detroit and be like, this is something that we can do in this year's draft.
I agree with you on everything that you just said. So rather than waste everyone's time, I want to expand on what you just said.
Go for it.
How did they do it? They flipped Matthew Stafford for a king's ransom of draft picks. If you look at what the Jets have this draft and next draft, I haven't, and I mean this, I can't even think of a time before the Rex Ryan era of the Jets where the cupboard looked this ripe for opportunity for this franchise. And to think that it's happening in the face of gigantic roster management problems. They're paying 2 quarterbacks that aren't on the team a combined $45 million this year. And they're still operating with this much of a draft surplus. So, I mean, if you are simply evaluating them by the hand that they were dealt, I am completely on the same page with you. And it, in my opinion, validates the trades with Tennessee. It validates the trades with Philadelphia. Most notably, it validates the Sauce trade. And by the way, the Jets don't even look that bad in the moment. I mean, obviously the injury to oh my God, why am I drawing the blank on his last name? Colts quarterback, used to play for the Giants,
Daniel Jones. Yeah.
Daniel Jones. Thank you, DJ.
Yeah.
The injury to DJ takes the Colts out of contention, but the Jets don't even look bad. It's not like they just handed the Colts a Super Bowl.
Right, exactly.
So all of this, in my opinion, is looking up. There are so many promising draft picks. And again, much like Detroit was in that situation, to kind of tie a bow on the Dan Campbell reference, much like Detroit was in that situation, it wasn't like, oh, we have one need, and if we get it wrong in the draft, it's curtains. No. We can draft for value, and whatever person that can help us, that's staring us in the face at that pick, come on in. And then combine that with not only players, like one of the pickups I'm most excited about is an average wide receiver in Josh Reynolds, but Josh Reynolds played in Detroit when Aaron Glenn was there. Like, they're going out and finding people that they know. And I think when you combine that young blood that's going to be hungry for a chance and the veterans that I think understand what Aaron Glenn wants to do, Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell are not for everybody. We learned that for Dan Campbell in year one. We watched Aaron Glenn dance down the sidelines in the game he ultimately lost. He's not for everybody, but I think he's going to find his people, and I'm much more excited about years 2 and 3 than year 1.
Yeah, for sure. And the choices that this squad has made and who they've retained, Garrett Wilson, obviously Armin Membu, who was my rookie of the year last year at right tackle. I mean, very rarely am I impressed by splash plays at the tackle position. That's a JJ thing, but even I recognize the greatness in that kid. And then Breece Hall back on the franchise tag. There is a very clear vision to me on who fits with this team, and based on the pieces they sent off, who they didn't. More importantly, Harrison Phillips, I think, is still on the roster for you guys, right?
Yes.
Who you traded for from Minnesota. There were a lot of Bills fans being like, hey, could we maybe send the Jets a 7th rounder and get Phillips? I'm like, Glenn is not going to want to give up a guy like Phillips. Like, Phillips is going to be a culture and a tone setter in that locker room for what Glenn wants to build. And then low key, the Devondre Sweat trade. I forget the edge that you gave up for him. I'm blinking on that name. But,
my goodness. He another Titan signing though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it was a kid for kid trade, right? And Tavondre Sweat just going to be a boulder in the middle of that defensive line for you guys. It's going to make James Cook's life hell on earth to try to run up the gut on that team.
And you know what? Let's stay on that because Tavondre Sweat was somebody I had in bold on my rundown. On the subject of veteran leadership, I don't know if Demario Davis can move laterally anymore, but I know he can lead a football team.
Yep.
And I know that that's what Aaron Glenn is looking for. And if you can get a grizzled, like it's like movie script stuff, but it's real. If you a grizzled veteran linebacker that can be the quarterback of your defense, and maybe he doesn't need to be on the field for even a quarter of the snaps, but he can get everyone else where they need to be, keep the energy up, keep the communication up between that at the linebacker position, between healthy, and I'm putting this in glaring air quotes because you never know with him, but currently healthy Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yes.
In the secondary. Then with Sweat, you literally have added explosive leadership at every level of your defense, and it's not even April.
Mm-hmm. And the spine of that defense looks a lot different now from Sweat all the way through to Fitzpatrick.
Right. So my, what I had in bold is you combine those three signings with the returning Okorafor, Sherwood, and Cisco, and you don't have all of what you need, but you have half of it, and you happen to have a ton of draft picks.
And you know what? Let's dive right into that because you've done such a good job of summing up the roster moves so far.
Yeah.
Your squad still has holes in it, right?
Right.
However, you have got the assets, both cap wise and draft wise, this year and next year to address a lot of that. You guys are making an unheard of 4 picks in the top 50. You pick 2nd, 16th, 33rd, and 44th. You have a grand total of 9 overall picks here in this draft. Mm-hmm. I want to start with the QB position, right? Because that's what everybody goes to. It's not a great QB class. You guys just brought back Geno Smith from a limited and unsuccessful stint with the Raiders, but he is only maybe 2 years removed from playing really solid quarterback play for the Seattle Seahawks, right? Do you think the Jets are done at QB, or do you think they're going to use one of these 9 picks to pick a developmental kid in this year's draft?
For the way that the general public thinks about the quarterback position, they are done at QB. For the way people like you and JJ and me think about the quarterback position, they are not done at the quarterback position. I think the 2 things that work in conjunction here is if they wanted to have a battle for QB1 with Geno Smith, then they keep either Tyrod Taylor or Justin Fields on the roster. They didn't do either of those things. The only quarterback that I'd really consider drafting early in the most kind, backhanded way possible has made it very clear he doesn't want to be a Jet. So I think your solution is kind of staring you right in the face. The longer the offseason is gone, the more validated Geno Smith appears to have been in his struggles. I mean, we've heard some horror stories about the lack of coaching, about maybe some nepotism plays leading to him not actually having a quarterback's room and not getting like adequate film breakdown. And, he's a guy, even in his struggling years, he's a guy that's always kind of had the pro attitude and took it on the chin. Really out of character stuff from him last year that I think makes a bit more sense when you hear some of the internal reports of what was going on in Vegas.
Yeah.
So put him with a guy like Frank Reich, who for all of Frank Reich's limitations is going to basically say to Geno, I just am going to put you in the shotgun. Breece Hall is going to be right next to you. And you're just going to make the decision every play, whether or not Breece Hall is getting the ball or you're going to throw the ball 5 to 10 yards. Then every once in a while, when I feel like you're doing really well, I'm going to just let you air it.
Dude, and I am higher on the Frank Reich hire than I think a lot of people are.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. Is he the most creative schemer out there? Is he like a mad scientist, Mike McDaniel? Absolutely not. However, he has generated excellent QB play out of what a lot of folks would consider to be average to slightly above average talent. And game to game, he is excellent at understanding what the opposing defense wants to run out. And he knows exactly what the pros and the limitations of his squad are. And he will tailor a game plan to exactly what his team can do and the other team can't do. While that may not be flashy, it sure can be effective if you're a team like the Jets that are just looking for a little bit of offensive stability to get you through the season. So I actually like the professionalism of the Frank Reich hire, and I like what he's going to add to that coaching staff overall for sure.
You can't get better until you've stabilized.
Right. You need a foundation. You need a floor somewhere.
And I think Frank Reich, and in a very weird way, as you know, I'm a big basketball guy. I would almost compare this to Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks. Can the Knicks,
such a good comp?
can the Knicks win endless championships with Tom Thibodeau and the way that he views the game of basketball? No. Are the Knicks as good this year without the history of Tom Thibodeau building them up? Absolutely not. So like you need someone that's going to be like, I'm going to be crazy about the fundamentals. And if I were to give you actually like inside baseball, the biggest problem I'm looking for him to resolve, in his first 3 years, Breece Hall averaged 50 or more receptions out of the backfield. And I think he barely hit 30 this year. He was coming off of the second Aaron Rodgers year when he had 80. Mm-hmm. And they basically made him a predictable downhill rusher. To his credit, he still eclipsed 1,000 yards, had a very respectable yards per carry, and earned the franchise tag. But like, imagine what this can look like with a reliable quarterback that has way more poise under pressure than Justin Fields ended up having, that can make decisions, that can get him involved at the right times. I'm valuing stability as the Jets try to get everything else right.
And you are maybe an interior offensive lineman or two away from having a really stout offensive line, which is something that Geno Smith needs to succeed. So again, this brings me back to the draft.
The draft. Yes.
Yes. So this is a draft rife with tackle prospects. It's rife with offensive linemen that have inside-outside versatility. Not a lot of truly great interior offensive linemen other than the kid out of Penn State. Mm-hmm. Which will be in your reach, I would imagine, at pick number 16. So all that being said, what are the positions you think the Jets are going to draft with their bevy of premium draft capital?
Let's start with QB because it's what everyone's going to talk about with the Jets have Geno Smith. I would not draft a QB until late day 2, early day 3.
100%.
There are two quarterbacks actually that I will mention by name that I think would be there.
Can I guess them?
Yes,
because I want to see if we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier.
Okay. So Nussmeier is one of them.
Okay.
Nussmeier is one of them. I have a thought here, and I'm trying to find in my notes. If Carson Beck from Miami is available at the very end of day 2,
why not?
I would sacrifice for that and take him. But I'm looking for any quarterback that has been developed, that has been kind of flagged by a scout already as needs at least a year of development. Mm-hmm. This is there's not going to be media pressure to play this person this year. There's not going to be organizational pressure to play this person this year. And by the way, I'm a big fan of that. Like I'm all for the red shirt year. I think you learn a lot. And especially as this team is undergoing so much transition with a guy like Frank Reich now in the fold that you could sit with and, chew up film with every day. That's my play. So we've addressed quarterback. We move that to the side. I think the only non-negotiable is your very first pick number 2. You have to draft the best defensive edge available. I think it's going to be David Bailey, and I think you have to take him. I have visions of John Abraham, in my teenage years for the Jets, and that's what I want. Once that's off the board, I think it is a hodgepodge of line on offense, biggest emphasis, line on defense, second biggest emphasis, defensive back. I can't envision a scenario where we get through an entire draft after the Jets just got rid of Sauce Gardner, where Aaron Glenn doesn't want to pick a defensive back to try to mold. But I also know that as far as depth goes, the first round value in defensive backs this year is not super high. And I'd much rather go with slam dunks early where you're going to get immediate value add. And
yes,
I don't like to give, there's a lot that the mainstream sports media gets wrong, but I want to give the Yahoo team that's doing their draft analysis a little bit of credit. One of the things they said actually earlier today about the Jets was if they just do what they should, there are 4 starters that will be staring them in the face with their first 4 picks.
Mhm.
If you can add a starter at 4 different positions in the first 2 rounds of the draft, don't outsmart yourself.
Agreed.
And I hope that gives it a nice concise look. I've heard some people talk about Mekhi Lemon, like, oh, if Lemon's there at pick 16, he could be great. I'm really high on how the Jets receivers ended last season.
Mhm.
Call me crazy. But
no, and I think you've got a legit number 2 potential in AD Mitchell for sure. I mean, for sure. And I think listen, Bills fans have been studying this wide receiver class up and down since Joe Brady got the head coach job. And it is a deep wide receiver class. You're going to find production and value on days 2 and even 3 of this particular draft. I mean,
Absolutely.
A kid like Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, who some have him mocked in the late first round, others have him going in the 3rd round because of the 40 speed that he is predicted to clock or has already clocked at his pro day. There's going to be ball winners like that you can get, big power slots that you can put next to Mitchell and Wilson. There's going to be a lot there. I think what you're saying is correct. Build from the line and then use your late early on, and then use the remainder of your draft capital to build out into the skill positions there. It's not a generational talent type of draft.
Correct.
But there are a lot of teams that are going to be really, really good and find really productive players in this year's draft, all up and down each day. I mean, this is where franchises really do find their high floor and a lot of great building blocks. And you guys are positioned perfectly for it, which infuriates the crap out of me as we give up a 2nd round pick for DJ Moore. But yeah,
I want to give. Yeah.
I don't. That was which I don't necessarily mind. It's basically like a 3rd round pick, but I'm like, come on, like Bean has to nail this draft and he's giving up opportunities to do so. So yeah. Anyways, this is not about us. This is about you. Sorry.
No, but you know what's funny? It's all relative because when you think about the 4 teams in this division in totality, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And someone in this division is, we're talking about 4 markets. Even if Buffalo isn't as big a market as a Miami or a New York or a Boston, don't tell that to their fans. And there's constant pressure to maximize for all 4 of these teams. It's not like some of the other divisions where it's like you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. You're trying to constantly show your fan base that you're going for it. I think by virtue of the Bills turning it over and trying to do some stability themselves, and the Dolphins, to my shock, honestly, Dan, like they made the Malik Willis signing, which is what I thought the Jets wanted to do. And the Jets, to their credit, were able to quickly pivot to Geno. But then, like right after signing Malik Willis, the Dolphins just fire-sailed their whole team. Yeah. So the Jets have an opportunity to benefit greatly while other teams are just trying to kind of maintain. And it makes things, honestly, I'm thrilled that you mentioned the Bills because the 26th season, in my opinion, is much more interesting for the Jets, not just because of what they're trying to do, but what's happening the rest of the league around them. And that includes an embarrassing Super Bowl loss by the Patriots.
And we are sadly not doing a Friends of the Pod episode with Brandon this offseason. Okay. We will have him on at some point, right? So we have been actually filling in a lot of the Patriots commentary for him, which, sorry, Brandon, if you don't come on the pod, you lose the opportunity to defend your boys. But it was... I don't think the Patriots. So let's take all of this into context because you have a really nice segue here in a discussion about the division, which I want to get into.
Sure.
So it is complete coaching turnover now at all 4 teams, right? With McDaniel being out of Miami this year, McDermott being out of Buffalo this offseason as well. Over the course of 18 months, you now have 4 new head coaches in a division that used to carry Belichick, McDermott, like some of the stalwarts in the division. You know what I mean? Even Saleh, I think you could argue had a pretty long tenure by Jet standards in New York, given everything that goes on with your guys' franchise, right? Mm-hmm. But the Patriots coming off of a Super Bowl, it does not feel like they are the ones being hunted in the division to the point that you made. I think that particular postseason run, and listen, I have a lot of Patriots fans that every time I even mentioned something slightly critical of Drake May and his play. They're like, we show nothing but Josh Allen but respect because we respect him. Why can't you respect our guys? I'm like, all right, pump your brakes. Okay.
Yeah.
Drake May is fine. But what you saw towards the end of that season, when the schedule got tougher, which is the type of schedule that the Buffalo Bills played all season. We played Houston in the regular season, right? We played Philadelphia in the regular season, not the Giants, not the Titans. You know what I mean? Like when the schedule got tough, that is a team that was very, very limited. And that was a QB that didn't just look like he hadn't been there before. All of the things that were in his scouting report coming out of the draft reared their head again. So, not to say that Drake May is like a regression candidate or anything like that, but I do think there was some inflation of progress for that particular team and that particular QB that I think teams are going to key in on this year as their schedule gets tougher. So I like what the Patriots have done, but the division does feel wide open again. And this may be a little bit crazy, but like we just saw the Patriots go from a 4-win team to the Super Bowl. Depending on what the Jets do in the draft, could they be a sneaky playoff team in your estimation this season if everything goes right?
Thank you so much for not asking me if they were going to be a Super Bowl team, because I would have looked at you like, no.
God, no.
No, they're not. No.
If Geno Smith makes a Super Bowl before Josh Allen, I quit football. I'm done. I'm good.
So here's what I do think, though. I think that, the Bills have defensive problems. The Bills.
Oh, my God.
The Bills have, in my opinion, they got the best defensive coordinator available in terms of upside. I love Jim Leonard, and I wanted him to come back to the Jets, but I could also understand why, if your boss is going to be someone that wants to call the plays and was also a defensive back, I could understand why that's not going to work itself out. If the Jets can shore up their defensive problems, a lot of these AFC games become winnable again. To your point about the Patriots, they couldn't beat teams that played good defense.
Mm-hmm.
So this all of a sudden, can you steal one from the Patriots? Can you steal one from the Bills? And I mean, if it's again, crazy way to look at this, but if the Jets steal 2 more conference games this past year, they're a 6-win team.
Right.
So, I mean, the way I look at it, I now kind of go to, okay, we're going to set the bar at a 6 to 7 win season. I think, in my opinion, the only good thing about a 17-game regular season is you can't go 500 anymore unless you try really hard with a tie.
So, I know, seriously. The tie is the only way.
Yeah. So, to me, the peak of what I think the Jets are capable of is somewhere in the 9 to 10 range and a wild card sneak in. But by the way, that was enough this year for a wild card sneak in. So is it possible? Yes. But what I would say right after that is, even if that's not probable, even sniffing that puts me as a Jets fan in the ease of, they really are following the Lions' trajectory. Aaron Glenn really is the right coach for this team. And, and here we go.
Right. I mean, if you guys become a 7, 8, even 9-win team, and I mean, listen, Miami is going to be what it's going to be. We talked to Steve already. He is coping with hope, as I like to say about his Fins, right? I'm going to ask you a question here to wrap this up that you'll find his answer hilarious too. It was great, but like 2 wins against Miami is not so unreasonable. Again, I don't know what the Patriots are going to be. I don't think they're going to fall off the face of the earth like a lot of teams do, but I mean, we saw this with the Cincinnati Bengals where they beat the Chiefs a few years back. They make a Super Bowl. They get one more good playoff run, and they've been in absolute limbo as a franchise ever since, not being able to figure a lot of things out because eventually the quarterback had to be paid. You had a wide receiver or 2 that needed to be paid, right? And there's only so much team building you can do. Now, I think the Patriots are a far better run organization than the Bengals are, but you have a lot of examples in recent history where the Super Bowl loser from a previous year, they really struggle in the following season and following couple of seasons. Again, I don't think that's going to happen to New England, But let's say you win 2 against Miami, you steal 1 against the Patriots. All of a sudden, you've got 3 wins in division, and the Bills are vulnerable defensively this year. Nothing to do with Leonard and the way he's going to coach, but everything to do with the personnel build out.
Right.
Me and JJ have been saying it's going to take 2 years to get this defense to where they needed to be personnel wise to fully execute this scheme. I don't think people fully understand how much of McDermott's DNA is still on this roster, particularly along the defensive line. And it's going to take time and resources to turn that over successfully. So you guys steal 1 from the Bills too. 4 wins in division, right? That puts you in pretty good place. And you're playing with a last place schedule as well. So
right.
Yeah. So
in the ultimate league of parity. And it's funny,
yes.
This is all things that I'm thinking about that, like, you know, you have heard me repeatedly as Jets fans over the last few years have tried to convince themselves that their team is great. Be like, get that noise out of here. So now here I am, where they don't look that great on paper. And here I am going, they have a real shot at having the youngest defense in the conference. And every player on the defense that isn't young is legitimately on a revenge mission. And this could be like a Island of Misfit Toys sort of vibe. And
it could be very interesting.
Yeah. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. So you think 9 wins, you think that's the ceiling for this crew this year?
Yeah, I would give you a ceiling of 9. I really do think the floor is 6. So I think they could hit 6 very realistically, and I'd be fine. If they hit 9, oh my God, I'm going to have to go buy some memorabilia again.
Dude, just fix that interior offensive line and give Geno all the time in the world he needs behind the line of scrimmage, and you'll get the best of what's left out of him, I would imagine. So it's, yeah, there's some sneaky potential for you guys to be super interesting. All right. We have gone all over the place with the run of show we had, and I've loved it. This has been super organic, but there is one I've got to get your take on. As I had mentioned, there are 4 new head coaches in the AFC East now officially with Halfley and Brady taking the reins for their respective teams. Give me how you would rank to finish up here all 4 of these head coaches. All right. You've got Vrabel, you've got Halfley, Glenn, and then you've got Brady. I will tell you, Steve had no shame and put Halfley number 1. Even the dude hasn't coached a single game for Miami yet. I got to tell you, Steve's optimism in the face of all evidence to the contrary, it's why we love him on this podcast.
Vrabel, I mean, Vrabel should have never lost his job at Tennessee, let alone. So, yeah, no, Vrabel's number 1 until somebody knocks him off. Then this gets really interesting.
Sure do.
You know, Brady and Halfley haven't proven anything yet. But if I'm being honest with myself, neither is Glenn. I would actually probably go Vrabel, Brady, Glenn, Halfley.
Yeah.
I don't now. You give this 3 weeks into the season, and this might flip around a lot. But the thing that Brady has done that I saw, and I remember talking to you about and JJ about it when it happened, is Brady took control of the Bills' offense for a week after they got rid of Ken Dorsey. And even if his play calling got a little vanilla after a while and his agenda wasn't as sexy as everybody wanted it to be, it immediately solved the problems the Bills were having. And there is a component of what we'll call fixedness that I value in coaches. Can they solve whatever problem is in front of their faces? So I'll put him at number 2 because he's at least proven that he can problem solve at this level. I know that Glenn has also done that because he had his year where literally 11 Lions players were on injured reserve, and he still got them to the AFC or the NFC Championship game on defense.
Yep.
Halfley, you're going to stay at number 4, especially while your team's in a total rebuild. You know, hopefully you'll have an opportunity in Miami to actually show what you can do, but it's certainly not going to be this season.
Yeah, it's not going to be this year. And he to me is the one that has maybe the most to prove. I think he's a great defensive coordinator. I loved him at Boston College. I actually think I may have ranked him 3rd when Steve and I were ranking it, but that was more the peer pressure that I felt from Steve and his like joyous, like, yes, we've got like a lunch pail guy in Miami, right? Like in Halfley who, cold weather coach, like he's going to bring some defensive sensibility of that organization. I think he's interesting, but I agree, maybe has the most to prove. Vrabel is like heads and tails though. Even if the Patriots fall off this year, you've got to do a lot to convince me that Vrabel is not going to be the best coach in that division for a very long time. He just every in-game decision is perfect. He's an excellent culture builder. He's got that perfect mix of like player accessibility, but accountability. He's got the CEO head coach thing down. You know what I mean? I have joked about pretty much anyone that'll listen to me about this. The worst thing that could have possibly happened to Sean McDermott this year is that the NFL started doing post-game locker room speeches, broadcasting those online, because you saw Vrabel and the energy that he brought, even the wackiness of Mike McDaniel at certain points. You know what I mean? Ben Johnson ripping off his shirt, Liam Cohen spraying water all over the place. And then you had McDermott, and it did feel tight. It felt like a sermon, and it felt like players were doing their duty, not necessarily having a good time doing it. Vrabel is a guy that commands respect like McDermott did, but also you could have fun while on the job with him too. And McDermott didn't bring that dimensionality to him. And I think that was on full display. And ultimately, I mean, I'm going to get into this with JJ. Ultimately, I think it was one of the things that made it so that he was not ever able to really shake the residue of 13 seconds. And I think casual football fans and non-Bills watchers were probably all very surprised by how much 13 seconds discourse came out after he got fired, and how much of a cloud that was over the organization until he left.
I think what you said is extremely compelling and gives us a really unique way to end this, because Aaron Glenn is Sean McDermott counterculture.
Yes.
Aaron Glenn is not Mike Vrabel. Aaron Glenn has not proven that he's going to out scheme you or out X's and O's you. But what Aaron Glenn is a legendary defensive back for the New York Jets franchise, who played with a level of competitive intensity and ferocity that he wants out of his players. And I do think in the same way that Sean McDermott was able to find enough what we'll call purpose-oriented people that even if they got burned out down the stretch of it, they bought into what he was selling. This test to me in year 2 is, are there actually enough Aaron Glenn guys out there that can match his level of intensity and kind of play with the swagger and the every play matters, I'm coming at you intensity that Aaron Glenn brings, which, by the way, I love. I mean, as a coach, I wanted that in my basketball players. So I think I vibe with Aaron Glenn more than I vibe with somebody like Sean McDermott. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But to your point, in this league, Mike Vrabel is the gold standard right now because he does it all.
Yes.
So until you prove that you can consistently beat that, your way is not the best way.
For sure. And that's a perfect place to end it on, dude. I mean, speaking of doing it all, you are a father, you're a podcaster, you're a basketball guy, you're a Jets fan. And as always, we appreciate your time for coming on the pod and enlightening us with what you think is going to be happening this year in New York. We will for sure have you back on as long as you're available and the schedules work for our annual Friends of the Pod AFC East mock draft. You're going to have a lot of fun, maybe more fun than some of us that are Bills fans are.
I feel like I'm going to have all
drafting.
the airtime. The Jets have infinity draft picks and everybody else has it.
It's crazy. And we only do 3 rounds. So, and you've got 4 picks in the first, it's nuts. It's nuts. Oh my God. But yeah, it'll be fun when we have you back on. But as always, man, good chatting with you. All right. And for those of you listening at home, we appreciate you listening to the chat. Like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are on YouTube if you want to see our faces. If you only want to listen with your ears, we are on Spotify and Apple as well. And as always, go Bills.